I am Gerald D. Jr. I'm the principal at St. Thomas More Catholic Academy, as well as the 8th grade language arts teacher. I've always been committed to teaching at least one class a year. It allows for my teachers to see me in the trenches or on the ground for us in the classroom with them. Today we're going to get started with the infamous research paper. There are different parts of the research paper. We're going to put it all together, figure out what the purposes of each of those parts is, and then what are some of the complexities of our research paper. Parts, purposes, complexities. Have we used that before?
Yeah.
Does anyone remember how we used it?
Then math, it was a piggy bank with like money flowing out of it, and we had to say what parts were, and purposes, and the complexities.
But that object is made up as a system, right? And those systems have different parts. The research paper is no different. Today we're going to be using the parts, purposes, and complexities routine really to chunk what seems very daunting for 8th graders. And so we're using this routine to really break it apart and figure out what are those parts, what does each purpose have, and how does it make it complex. On the back of this packet, there are not full research papers. Your research paper is going to be a lot longer. We're going to take about 5 minutes to list all of the parts of a research paper that you see there. I'll put the time on the clock. So I know that the students are familiar with parts, purposes, complexities, but they've never done it in the context of language arts. So I chose parts, purposes, complexity because it's one of my favorite routines for really breaking things apart and making it more tangible for students. We can look at just one little piece and spend some time there figuring out what its purpose is and then how we can make that more complex. Time's up. Now we're going to turn and talk with our friends.
Thesis, body paragraphs, conclusion, periods, commas, and capitalization. I said all these things because you do have to make sure you have these things when you are writing a research paper, like periods so you can know when to stop, and introduction so you can introduce what you're writing.
Topic and planning, because nobody really writes a paper out of the blue. There has to be planning so you know what idea you're going to do and then start out.
The students talked about my planning, the research that I have to do. I have to look up things. I have to fact check things. So they're understanding that this writing, the active piece is not just in the actual writing of information. It's also that I'm going to be doing something more. Now, I saw you did something though when you were looking at your body paragraphs. You were underlining things. Tell me what were you underlining in your specific thing?
The things I were underlining were important details within the paper. Like basically it was about the impact of social media on teen mental health. So I underlined the apps that were used, and I underlined the data that was used to say why it was an effect or why it was a good and a bad thing.
Kennedy talked about the body paragraphs having information. That's what you said. You also said that it had data, all of those things, right? What parts of the body paragraph are those, right? And once you determine and talk about what those parts are, what other important part do we need in a research paper, do you think? And I'll come back. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, go. I think one of the things that I'll really be focusing on with my students is first off, what is it that they already know? And then I really want to see what parts of the actual paper are they going to find complex, which pieces are going to be challenging for them, which parts am I going to have to spend a lot more time really focusing on. I got a question about the parts of the sites there, right? Do you know where those go in your research paper? If so, is that a part of the research paper?
Yes.
Do you know where they go?
The end.
The end? Do you know what the end is called? See if you can talk about it with each other. All right. One of the parts that I assumed and was very surprised that students kind of knew about, they just couldn't name it, was the works cited or reference page.
Sometimes they put it in the actual research paper itself.
Yes.
So like inclusion and the time names.
The credits, there's another word for it, but you guys are on the right track. Keep talking about it. And when we started talking a lot about those sources and I named this page, one student even saying like, don't they actually go in the paper too? That was also surprising me. Like, yes, they actually do go in the paper.
After the body paragraph, it will be a supporting synthesis.
Okay,
It
why?
will be a supporting.
Why would the supporting
Because
synthesis?
it basically follows up on the evidence. It provides, like, in most cases, more examples. And supporting
To what?
to the body paragraph.
Okay, to the overall what?
The overall theme of
Question,
the
I'm sorry. Yep, all right. All right, in 10 seconds, let's get those posted up. So let's name some parts. What are some parts? Anthony, give me a part of a research paper.
supporting details.
Supporting details, okay.
Body paragraph.
Body paragraphs, all right.
Thesis statement.
Thesis statement, so that's another part. Usually is located in what part of the research paper?
Introduction.
And the introduction paragraph, right? But if everything has a beginning, it must also have an end. So what is another part of the research paper, Kingston?
Conclusion.
The conclusion. Now, another part that Naeem, you said was what? Sources. Do they make up another part of the research paper?
No.
Or are they just inside of the body paragraphs and stuff? They make up another part. Does anyone know the name of that? They make up a very important part. You can add this on your chart. You can call it your reference page or your works cited. Take about a minute to think on our own. Pick a couple of those parts. What are the purposes of those parts? There were some students that with this routine, I know writing is really challenging for them, but the moment that they were able to kind of list down the different parts, there were some students that really spoke a lot more. What's the thesis statement? What's the purpose of that?
We as a group put the thesis statement provides more context on what you're going to be talking about and information.
Your whole research paper is anchored in this thesis statement. And that thesis statement comes from who?
Us.
From you, right? So that is your thoughts, your beliefs. Give me another part.
The introduction.
So what might be the difference between an introduction and a body paragraph? What might be the actual purpose of the introduction? I don't like what if I'm bored.
Like trying to persuade you into reading it.
Persuade me into reading it? How might you persuade me into reading it?
Like,
Give me a glimpse, you might give me a hook, right? You want to get my attention, right? Just talk to me about the purpose of those sources.
The purpose of them sources was like, it's different evidence like you could put in your article.
Sources. What might make that particular part and its purpose complex? I want you to think about that. I'm gonna come back to you for that. Damari, give me another part.
supporting details.
Okay, talk to me about your supporting details.
They're there to help you support your claims.
So all of these moving parts have a purpose, and we'll talk about the complexities in a second. Take a minute, let's write some stuff on Post-its, get those up on the board, and I want to hear some share-outs.
So one thing that I said was that the body paragraph could give really important details and facts about the thesis statement on the paper.
Okay.
And it could also give evidence for if somebody didn't know.
They were very familiar with those body paragraphs, that they needed to have supporting details, that they needed to be able to make a claim or to have a thesis statement, and they had to have support of that. That was a big thing. Now, you share with us what the purpose of the sources is.
Like the purpose of the sources was like to like provide more evidence, like prove your claim, like prove your thesis statement.
Now, William, you wrote a word in front of sources. What's the word that you wrote in front of sources?
Reliable.
Why did you write reliable sources?
Fact check.
Fact check? Tell me about that. What makes you say that? Fact check.
Cause it might be real, it might not be real, but you gotta go to multiple sources that you really could trust and think that's reliable.
Many of them kept writing sources, and one student even wrote down reliable sources, right? And so there's this idea that I know this information, whatever claim that I'm making, I have to have reliable sources, and I have to somehow put them in the papers. The truth is important, right? So when we talk about the complexities of sources, why might that particular part of our research paper be complex? The sources. Yes, Jazar.
You have primary sources and then you have secondary sources where it's basically an account of someone else's findings or someone else's research.
Okay. Now, why else might sources be complex?
Finding a source that like suits around the topic of your research paper.
So one of the complexities that comes from our sources is that there's so many of them, right? We have to fact check them. Someone said that. I have to know if it's a primary or secondary source, but then I also have to know so there's the reliability, but also is it even pertinent to my research paper? Or is it just another thing that I'm reading and learning about, all right? So pick some of the parts that you have. You talked about the purposes. How do those parts and purposes make your research paper complex?
My purpose that I chose was the introduction, and the complexities to that is that the introduction gets the reader interested in the paper, makes them want to read it. Some papers could be very boring for us, but it is also informational. So like in our quest to do our papers and find out what's something informational for us, the introduction really can grasp us in the idea of what we're really trying to find the paper for.
Planning, why is that complex?
I said, well, planning is complex just because it makes your paper well thought out.
All right. Any other thoughts on our parts, purposes, and complexities of a research paper? Hey.
Isn't some sources usually in like parentheses?
Yes, good question. Yeah, good comment. Some sources that go into the body paragraph. So whenever we're quoting, paraphrasing, or summarizing something, we have to cite that source if it is not our own words. So write down some complexities, get them up on the board. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'll leave this up on the board. We will pick up tomorrow with whatever you come in with your thesis statement. I think one of the big things that really pleased me was the fact that they were able to collaborate and speak with each other once prompted. What we're finding now in 8th grade is that students who were never talking are now feeling that they can access the learning because they can share their thoughts because their thinking is valued. And our students feel that their voice matters.